Anyway, so today we're going to go over one of the most essential skills in lutherie, whether you're a guitar tech or a builder. It's essentially vital to understand and be good at performing the fret dress. And what is that exactly? Well, it is the process of leveling, crowning, and polishing your frets. All right, there are a few really prime times that you're going to encounter that, or the three most common times that you might need to do a fret dress are going to be at the end of a refret, right? You just put new frets in. We want to make sure that they're perfectly level, rounded, and polished, all right? But also it's a maintenance that's done on frets, is like we're going to be doing here today on this 2016 Gibson. It's owned by a customer of ours. He's a touring musician, and he plays it hard, as you will tell. So we're going to do some nice cleanup on this guitar eventually as well. And this might have been being a two-parter, but we're going to get it going today. The one other time that you might encounter this, or at least most common time, is that perhaps somebody just bought a brand new guitar right off the rack, whether it's an inexpensive guitar or even some of the nicer ones out there. There's, something to be said for the feel and just the confidence that you get from a really well-performed fret dress by a good luthier, right? There's something that happens when it's really well leveled, crowned, and polished. You get a really nice buttery feel for bends, vibrato, and of course, we want to make sure that the guitar plays buzz-free. That combined with a good setup is going to help ensure that. So on to the fret dress here. If you take a look, first thing, I want to kind of point out a couple of things here. If we can try to get a little bit more of a close-up. You can see that this fret has some divots and some pits, or several of these frets do. Certainly gets much worse, but this one is ready for some maintenance, especially for someone who plays as seriously as this guy does. So one of the first things that I like to make sure of is that there's enough fret left to do a dress. All right, so there's kind of a point at which we decide, okay, these are too low. I'm really not going to be able to do this guitar or this customer justice by doing fret dress. It's time for a refret, time for new frets, right? But a good way to get an idea here is we're going to check with our calipers, and I'm just going to get an indication here of the height of the frets and what we have to work with. All right, so this one is getting close, but as you see, as we move up the neck here, we're getting to, this is about 34 thousandths of an inch, and you're going to find that I think we're generally average 34 to close to 40 when I checked this one earlier. The cutoff point is basically 30 thousandths of an inch. You see some 40s up here in the upper register. So if we see that it's 30 or less, okay, at that point, I really can't get a good crown, a good level out of this thing. There might be some rare instances where I might try to do what I can to help somebody that isn't ready to maybe, can't afford a refret, or for whatever reason they want to push it down the road a little ways. But 30 thousandths is kind of the cutoff looking for and looking at. Another thing that I want to point out too is with these divots here, or pits in the frets, sometimes they can look a lot worse than they are. And of course, this is actually, lower than the measurement that I was getting earlier. And it's a little difficult to get in here and really get a measurement of the height, of the lowest point here in these little divots. But a couple things to consider here is that, one, when we are playing the guitar and playing chords in this area, we're most commonly going to inspect the frets in this open position. If someone uses a cable a lot up the neck, then you will probably see good sized pits up the neck more as well. But even for someone like myself, I play, I'm equal opportunity fretter, I suppose, and so I play all over the neck, about the same amount up and down, but I still will get more frets, or I'm sorry, more pitting in larger pits in this open position. And that's largely because the tension at the end of the string's treble is more, right? And so the string is loosest at the center of its elliptical pattern, right, or its rotational pattern. And so we have a lot more tension. It's a lot tighter here. And of course, people tend to dig in a little more, and they most do play in this area more. So whenever I'm looking and inspecting a guitar and to see if it needs a fret dress or something, we pull that B string aside. Sometimes the E, the G, the plain strings will really be the telling point here. So when we're playing and making these divots, though, it's not like the metal is just being, shaven off into the universe. It doesn't leave the fret necessarily, but we're pushing it side to side. These nickel fret wire, it's a soft metal. And so what's happening is that over time, we're kind of pushing that metal side to side a little ways and creating these. And so we're actually kind of building up little walls kind of next to the pits as well. And it can actually make it appear worse than it is. So customers will call and say, I need new frets. This is terrible. And, and maybe they do, but in most cases I'll say, okay, bring it in and let's take a look at it, And so I want to get a good measurement. And if we do determine that there's enough fret wire left, and if I explain to them that they probably do have enough there, and maybe it just looks worse than it actually is, and they say, okay, great, then let's do another fret dress and save these frets and the lifespan of these frets, extend them just a little bit longer. All right, so you'll see too that as I work on this, they might be so bad we might not be able to get them completely gone, but by the time you've gone through all 3 steps, most of the time they will be gone, or they're going to be very microscopic and you've still made massive improvement. All right. I want to say 2 more things about this. When the frets get really flat or pitted, we can have intonation problems. So especially if we're playing open chords, right? We tune the guitar up here and we're in tune and everything looks great on our tuner. But as soon as we start to fret notes, they're not agreeing with one another, each string, right? Well, the flatter the fret gets, and this is especially going to happen more and more with wider jumbo type frets, the string, instead of coming off of the center of the fret, the very top center, like you'll see later, we'll talk more about that and how we're going to achieve that and why it's important. But largely it's important because if it's flat, now the string will be leaving the fret further this way, right? Further over here. That'll be the contact point where it leaves the fret. You're shortening the string ever so slightly, which will sharpen the note. Right, so we'll have a mix of sharp notes and in-tune notes and chords that don't agree with one another, and notes within the chord that don't agree with one another. So that's one of the big reasons why the flat frets and the pitted frets are going to cause problems. Of course, more metal to metal contact when you're fretting notes and bending, it's going to make for more resistance and a less, pleasurable time bending notes and doing vibrato and that sort of thing. Going to have to work harder for it. And then, of course, if we have a fret that's lower than the one in front of it, we have a better chance for a buzzing note. So that's kind of the obvious one that brings a lot of people in and has them start to ask about the need for the fret dress. So we're going to get going with this one. We're going to use the neck jig today. It's a great opportunity to introduce this tool. It is not always essential, but boy, does it help to get good, consistent results in fretting. It was actually designed and really shines with guitars that don't have an adjustable truss rod, such as Martins before 1985, 86 range, and also harmonies and Ks and that sort of thing, where there's a truss rod in there, but you can't adjust it. And what are we going to do about that? We have way too much relief in the neck. There's things that we can do with this to simulate string tension, and there's a pin that gets pulled from here, and this whole table will rotate with the guitar into the playing position, and we can calculate things and basically end up with the desired amount of relief. And so that's kind of another topic that we could probably cover in a later time, but we'll go over the basic fret dress here for today. So I'm going to start by getting this thing strapped into the jig, and I want to start with a closed ratchet strap. Insert through the opening, pull as much slack out of this as I can. We're going to start to tighten it down. Notice how the ratchet is nowhere near the guitar body or my table for that matter. As you can see, over time it can chew that up. I'm going to come down here and see if this thing is still wiggling. Just kind of move the headstock. It is. I can easily add another crank on it, and that's nice and stable now. We just have some movement from the table. Very happy with that. Okay? So if I was going to, I just want to show you real quick that this table can do this and rotate into the playing position, right? So Brian, Mr. Galloup, helped develop this tool a long time ago with Dan Earlywine, and now you maybe are familiar with the Dan Earlywine neck jig that's been sold at Stuart McDonald for some time. But in its simplest form, it's been this table that Brian, initially made, and we can basically get the same results with this table as we can with the other one. It has some nice features and things like that, but this is the most important part of the neck jig, is some calls here to be able to really hold the body steady, and some dial indicators turning it into the playing position. All right, so we're nice and stable. I've also arranged this so that these calls can move back and forth, and we've got a nice cradle to hold the body and keep it level, right? That's important. As I strap and put pressure on the body, I want to make sure I'm not putting pressure on the radius back here. So it's being supported on the shoulder and back here as well. We have some room with this one for some fine tunability to move it north or south to achieve the ever so important location of this call, which is going to be right below that first fret, right? Somewhere, you know, in this range, ideally not pressing against a volute for guitar that might have one right here, right, you know, below the nuts. So that's a great location there. That's really important. And honestly, even if you don't have a neck jig, you should find a way to have a system with two supports for the neck, with one being under the first fret and the second being somewhere between that first call and where the neck meets the body. So, you know, somewhere in here, 5th to 9th fret range, you know, ideally right around the 7th fret is great. All right. So you can come up with a lot of ways to achieve that. Stuart McDonald sells the self-leveling neck rest. That's a tool that can kind of get you there, but you can easily make something just like that or even better. All right, so before I bring these up to support the neck, I'd want to just get a little preliminary idea of where the truss rod currently sits. As far as relief, back bow, I want to see that this neck is as straight as I can get it. This is just a preliminary idea. Again, you'll see pretty soon here that I'm really going to be using the feedback from leveling to decide what to do with the truss rod. But in this case, we have a pretty healthy amount of back bow. All right, so I've got a notch straight edge and an unnotched straight edge here. And for this, I really want to read the frets. I'm going to be working on the frets themselves, so I prefer to not use the notched one in this case. All right, so let's pop the truss rod cover and hope that we have enough room for adjustment on this thing that we can get this neck where it belongs. There's quite a bit of back bow. Does not surprise me that this guitar has probably seen many nights in a bar and maybe a few spills of your favorite soda beverage or otherwise. I don't know, maybe some sweat, who knows, but this thing is really on here. I hope that they didn't glue it. There it goes. All right, this was already a 2-piece truss rod cover, so we're just gonna leave the other part there. I noticed that was cracked early and broken. Okay, all right, so I've got my 5/16 truss rod wrench. That's what we need for the Gibson truss rod nut. I've loosened that quite a ways. That's basically all the way loose and awesome. We have a little bit of relief now. So I actually went a little too far, but I was really hoping that that would be the case. So I really need to get this neck as straight as I can, but also ideally don't want to level it with no tension on the truss rod. Okay, that's kind of another situation to be covered. It's kind of another of those peripheral topics that, you know, we could address later, but let's just kind of go with the standard here. All right, there we go. I'm not going to obsess about this. I'm just making sure that I'm in the neighborhood here. I think I could probably tighten the truss rod a little bit more. I'll hold this here. You can also turn off your light and put another light, like a flashlight or something behind it to really try to see gaps, and ideally no gaps between the fret and the straight edge. That looks pretty good. Seeing maybe just a little bit of light up in this area. I don't know if the camera could catch that or not, but right up in here, we've got, you know, a couple that aren't quite touching. Let's see if we can improve that, because these are all touching up here. Tighten the truss rod to reduce the amount of relief. Right, righty-tighty as I stare at it. Okay, that looks good. Good as I'm going to get for now with that. But again, we're going to reassess that here in a few minutes. Now the next thing is very important. We want to make sure that we have some face guards in place on this guitar. So I grabbed some from our school stock, and I just want to protect the area next to the fretboard extension, right? So as I come through with different tools, if they slip, that's a lot of problems that can arise from that. If we hit the finish, so we're going to protect that. Make sure that when you're putting this on, that the face guards aren't under it, so you're not clamping those face guards right into the body, cause some finish or other damage, dents and things. Get these in place, secured, nothing flopping around. Got the blue painter's tape, low tack. You're going to see later that we're going to hit the buffing wheel, and that's one reason that we want to make sure that this thing is not just flopping around loose. All right, I'm happy with that. Okay, now the next step is going to be to blue the frets. We like to use the blue Marks a Lot marker. It's kind of been a standard. Of course, you could find some other colors will work fine, but there's something about the blue. The way the light hits it, it's dark enough, but it's also just one of the easier colors to see for whatever reason. So find, you know, purple or sometimes black will work as well, but the blue is generally preferred around these parts. And the mark slot is nice and wide, so I have less chance of falling off the fret. I prefer to not tape the board at this point, but you could do that if you're worried. If you slip and hit the fretboard, just wipe it up real quick. We're going to clean it off later. Now, if I had a maple fretboard, I would not be doing this right now. That's another topic to be covered, but you're going to approach the maple board just a little bit differently. All right, now I'm going to bring the call up until it just supports the neck. These dial indicators are not necessary for what we're doing today when we have an adjustable truss rod. Those are really in place here for the other use I mentioned earlier when we have a non-adjustable truss rod and we're simulating string tension to dial in a specific amount of relief. Sometimes I like to show you something real quick here. I can bring this up. I don't even have to zero it, but it'll tell me when I hit the back of the neck because the needle will move. That's useful. I don't want to push the neck up into more relief, right? So I'm trying to just support the neck. I see students often come up here and over tighten these things. And so that, tell them, that's good feedback. You can always do that and engage that dial indicator to tell when you've just hit the neck. Even this one, you'll see, we'll move that needle. Once I've hit it, oh, yep, too much, right? Back it off. They're a little loose, so you'll see the needle wiggle a little bit, but I don't mind seeing it move 1/1000th or something. That's pretty good right there. There we go, just hitting. Perfect. Okay. All right, I'm just going to get this thing out of the way because I don't want it to cause any problems right now, and just keep it out of the way. All right, I've got a leveling bar here with 220 grit sandpaper. You'll see people commonly using 220 or 320 on the nickel fret wire. In the repair world, 220 is a great way to go. And before I start to level, I'm going to want to point something out here. We have a cylindrical radius. This is not a compound radius on this guitar. And so if you think about it like a Coke can or something like that, when we're leveling, as we move our way back and forth, we need to make sure that, this board is tapered, right? It gets wider and wider and wider back here. So in order to hit this edge of the fret, I need this bar to be hanging off here. All right, that's how it's going to be, because if you think about it, I want this bar to always be parallel to these inlays that run down the center, my position markers on the top of the fretboard. In other words, I don't want to turn it to match the taper of the board. All right, I need it to always stay parallel to that line, okay? And I could level, in theory, I could go this way when I level, or like this, as long as this doesn't happen. All right, if we have a compound radius, that's a little different story. Then we will be kind of basically following each string's path, if you think about it that way, individually following each string and kind of the line that would take. And so you will see more of a swing that happens. Okay, let's take a few swipes here. I'm just going to run back and forth here with the bar, trying to keep it as parallel as I can to the center line. We'll go back and forth once or twice, and then I'm going to stop. And I'm going to assess what's happening here. Can you see that okay? Just curious to see. Are you able to see the blue better if I turn this on for a second?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So we think of the fretboard in 3 zones, and my goal here, I'm still in a phase where I'm assessing whether or not I should adjust the truss rod more before I continue and finish my level. What we're trying to do here is remove as little fret material as possible to get all of these things level. How will I know when it's level? I will see that the tops of each fret have been hit with the bar. Okay, so some frets will have quite a bit of the blue removed. The last couple that I hit will have just a tiny little bit of blue just taken off the very top. And once they all have that, I'm done. Up to the body joint at this point is really the main thing that I care about from here to here. This is where we'll address this later. If this hasn't been hit, we'll come back to that. All right, so with this, I'm seeing that, okay, like these first 3 or 4 frets, kind of zone 1, this middle area, 5 to 9-ish would be zone 2. Zone 3 is going to be up here from 9 to the body joint, 14 in this case. I'm seeing that we actually have a pretty good balance, but really zones 1 and 2 tell you a lot of what you need to know. If I have relief in the neck, still a little bit of relief, then I'm going to see more blue removed here than from here, right? And that tells me that I should adjust my truss rod just a little bit more and probably tighten that, right? So, and then the opposite, of course, is true. If I have less contact here than the center area, that tells me I likely have back bow, and I'm going to loosen the truss rod ever so slightly, re-blue my frets, and then check it again. All right, so like I said, we've got a pretty good balance here, honestly. I could probably just about leave it here because with the pits that I have here in the balance, I think they would all come in around the same time, but if anything, I would consider tightening this truss rod just a little bit because I have some area here that has not been hit quite as much. And so I want to demonstrate that. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to make sure that the net can move where it wants to. I'm just going to bring these cauls down for a second again and just ever so slightly tighten the truss rod. Okay? And do not forget to bring these back up. Easy one to forget. I see that happen a lot. All right, just bring them up till they just hit the back of the neck and support it so that it's not bouncing around when we're leveling, right? I like to do that sometimes. Make sure it feels solid and I don't hear this thing clicking around. Okay, good. I am going to re-blue some of these here, especially in zones 2 and 3. Honestly, this was pretty good preliminary truss rod spot here. Let's see if maybe we can get a little better balance. Yeah, I'm okay up there. We're actually hitting up in the tongue extension here more than zone 3, but overall, we've got a pretty good balance. I'm not too worried about that right now. All right, do some more leveling. Make sure I spend a little more time on the ends before I move my way back. Spend a lot of time hitting the middle of the board. I see people hit here and immediately bounce back, and then they hit here and immediately bounce back. Take a couple extra swipes while you're out here, and then move your way back over. Okay, let's assess it again. Actually, I'm going to run it over it one more time. I think we can remove a little more material. We'll get better feedback. Okay. All right, I think that's a better balance, and I think I'm going to tighten the truss rod just a little bit more, though. I've got a good section here that hasn't hit yet, and we're hitting pretty much everywhere here through here other than these little divots. So one more little tweak, because I barely moved that at all that last time. A little more. Helps if you make that noise when you do it. Good. Just kind of slap them into place. Good. Okay. Cool. This is kind of what I was hoping that I'd see. That time I turned it a little bit more, and I think I went a little bit past the point, but I wanted to kind of give an example now of maybe a little bit of backbow, maybe a little more than we want. So I've got really good contact from here to here and not hitting the first and second fret really at all. Can you see that okay in there? Okay, cool. So just going to loosen this one more time, and I'm going to find a happy medium just about halfway back from this last turn that I made, and I think we're going to be good to go. And honestly, it'll almost be done at that point. It's going to be a pretty quick level, I think, hopefully. It's a good idea to blue the frets again, at least in some of the primary areas, to really give you the feedback that you need. Great. Okay, so this whole time, there's been a little bit of a low spot right here that hasn't been hit, largely because I think there's probably a couple high frets in the surrounding area that aren't allowing it to hit there. But overall, I think I've got as good of a balance as I can with material that's being removed from these frets. I'm still hitting pretty well through the center otherwise, and I'm just hitting, on the first fret all the way across, and I'm hitting pretty much 2, 3, and 4. This is great. So I'm going to call it good for the truss rod. And we're just going to level from here. Just want to check these one more time. Okay, so now I'm not going to touch the truss rod anymore. Now we're just going to level. I'm going to keep my technique the same, and we're going to go until we hit the tops of all the frets. Make sure that you have a leveling bar that covers all of the frets, ideally, or at least up to the body joint. I wouldn't want to use the little short one right now, although there was a time where luthiers would do that, I suppose, and there's some other techniques out there, but this is a better option now that we have it. This is generally a good way to go. If you're worried about blasting into the nut, then you could put a capo maybe right next to it, and then maybe I'd have to just scoot the guitar forward a little more, or you could try to safely remove it if that's something you feel comfortable doing. I'd rather not if I don't have to, especially when there's finish on the outsides of it. And of course, I should point out too that, make sure that you're not going to hit, if it's a Fender style guitar and you take the nut out, you don't want to blast into a tuner, of course, or a tuning machine. You might need to remove one. And especially on electric guitars, before I level, I'm just going to kind of get back here and check and make sure that I'm not going to hit a pickup cover on a Gibson Les Paul or something. I'm not going to hit a pickup. Lower the pickups down and put some blue masking tape over the pickups to help keep dust, steel wool, whatever, shavings, nickel pieces, just keep them clean and keep them safe. Let's take a look. Sitting pretty good here. I have hit across. Except for the divots, I'm pretty much done on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 is almost done, but there's a little bit here on this edge. The low E would pass under that, so I'm not done with this fret. Okay, that string, I need it to hit where the strings are going to hit at the very least, right? So this one is not done, and of course we still have this low spot that's been here the whole time. in this little area. These frets are done, and a couple little just, you know, scattered bits of blue. So we're going to keep going. This is great because I think ideally by the time these come in, we should also be just about through these little divots as well. All right, and everything should be done around the same time. That's what we're trying to get to. I just want to reiterate though, I don't necessarily have to keep going until all the divots are out. If everything else has been hit and my divots are much smaller, save some divot for the next 2 steps because they're going to get a lot smaller through those steps and you're probably going to find they're gone by the time you're done. If I'm not careful with how much time I'm spending or my angles with the bar, I'm going to change the radius of the fret, right? This fretboard, this being a Gibson, will have a 12-inch fretboard radius and the fret should match that. Compromise that if my technique is not good. All right, still looking good. Still some work to be done here. I really think that there's a few high frets in the tongue extension that are causing some, well, not problems, but keeping me from hitting here. But it's not what's called a rising tongue, right? That's kind of a separate issue as well that sometimes needs to be addressed. I'm not hitting at all on the last 2 frets. I've just got a couple here that are in the way. I think they're just a little high. Maybe they were never down all the way. I don't think they were. There's a little gap, tiny little gaps under them. If I had a loose fret right now, I would not want to be leveling my frets either. We need to check and identify that there are no loose frets before we do a fret dress. You should freeze those in place or take care of that before you level, always. I'm going to put a little more pressure back here. I'm going to put my hand here in hopes of removing a little more material from this area that's causing more problems because this one is almost good. So this will kind of help me a little bit. Take more off of this end, which is also better because it's almost never played. This guitar doesn't even have a cutaway, so pretty unlikely that these frets are going to see as much attention or mileage as these. Notice I'm not pulling it way back and exposing these frets, you know, as much, you know, occasionally you might have to do that some, but you don't want to take these long swipes. I'm trying to keep all frets covered at all times. Lots of little things that go into this that are important. As they say, the devil's in the details. All right, getting close in that area right there. I'm just hitting my fret guard there, bass guard. This is really close. Just got a few little bits now. This is, yeah, we're almost there. Now, this is a great time to point this out because I see people make this mistake as well. All the blue that I have left is right here. That doesn't mean that I can just stay here and sand the whole time. All right, when I was getting started with this, I didn't really understand that either at first until it was explained to me, but I still have to maintain my radius. So even though these frets are essentially done, I have to keep sanding them as much as I sand here. All right, otherwise we're going to create a dip and totally mess up the radius of the fret. It's going to be really bad if I do it too much. Okay, so sand equally across the whole board. Regardless, I'm going to check frequently now because I'm so close that I want to stop as soon as I'm good. I don't want to take off any more than I have to. And I'm almost to a point where I could flip to a short bar to finish this up. But I'm not ready for that yet because I've got a couple spots here, here, and here, right? And if you look up here, the divots, they are almost gone as well. That's the big one. You'll get that under the B string, of course. Okay, close. I'm really focusing on trying to bring these are really tall frets anyways. So I've got more meat on those. I'm going to try to take more off of that end. I've mentioned some Stuart McDonald products today, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out and thank our friends at Music Nomad for providing us some tools for our students to demo. We've got basically every tool that they have for repair and building here at the school that they've donated for our students to try out, as well as a discount that is given to all of our students on their products. Okay, so you're going to see that little specks of blue here and here in these last 2 frets, if you can. And then we've got, yeah, there you go. Boom, boom. But done, 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 right? And like I said, it doesn't have to be this wide of a silver area. As long as it's been hit at all, even just the top has just been skimmed, that fret is done if it's all the way across. These have all been hit pretty well though. So I think we're pretty good. I think I still have to just chase this out right here. Got to go a little bit more. At this point, I'm not removing much material from this top, from this open position and that end of the board. In a refret, this usually goes much faster because you have good frets and brand new frets. And if you put them in well, then this can be done in, you know, a minute or sometimes even less for some people. A couple minutes anyway for a lot of folks. Okay, cool. I'm pretty happy with that. We've covered up to the 9th, 10th fret range. We're good to go. Little specks on the very end, that's beyond where the string passes, but I'm going to show you what you can do because There's also times where maybe I have not hit up here much if at all yet, right? Because of what many of you know as fall away or drop off, as some companies may call it. And so naturally the board may kind of dip down and be lower after it meets the body. And so that is where the shorter bar comes into play. See if I've got enough meat on this one or enough paper. I don't think to get that ready, but basically the idea here is as long as this bar covers from the fret that we need, you know, the area that we need to the end, I can come in here and finish with this bar, all right? That doesn't mean that if everything's good except for right here, I can just hit the middle spot, because now I've created a low spot. You know, these frets will be lower than these, which could cause buzzing notes, right? We can't create a dip in the board. So as long as the bar covers from a certain point to the last fret, and I only have a little bit left to go up here, then I'll employ the shorter bar. I'm gonna look over here really quick though and see if maybe there's one other one in better shape. And there is. All right. I'll get a Stumac bar out for this one. This is good fresh paper. All right. Wow. And we're done. Hooray. Okay. So the last fret has a little spot here that hasn't been hit, but you know what? I don't care. This one is probably not going to get played, but even if it does, what's it going to buzz on? There's no fret in front of it to worry about, so we're good to go. Let's just move on with our lives. All right, now it's time for the crown phase, and typically, you can bring it back to your bench now. You're done with the neck jig, but you could also just keep it in there for now. Do we want to do the crowning point now, or do we want to do that next? Okay, cool. So I would generally get a brush and get the dust off of the board real quick. So I'm going to borrow one from someone real quick because we're not at my bench. It's helpful to have like a little paintbrush around for that. We always tape over the metal parts of the paintbrush just to make sure it doesn't ding and dent the guitar. But this little bench brush will work for now. All right. And so now it's time to tape off the board, or we could crown and then tape the board off. And actually, I think I'm going to do it that way because I also want to demonstrate how I go about cleaning the board before I tape it to get the best result at the end. And I think there's also a valuable lesson in learning how to clean all the hand cheese off of a neck like this one, because I don't know if you noticed, but this is a pretty gnarly neck, pretty dirty, you know, that awesome gunk. And I think it's a good time to make another point here. I love character and patina on a guitar as much as anyone. You can see that I think, you know, you probably saw earlier in the shot that this guitar has been well played. Nice wear and tear. This sees the road a lot. All right. But the fretboard is not really the place for that, you know, and so I talk to customers about that. You know, it's always good to check with them first before we clean it, because sometimes, you know, once or twice in 1,000 fret dresses, I've had people that didn't want me to clean their fretboard, or maybe were upset if you did it and didn't ask. But this is really not the best place for that mojo, because if you let that stuff pile on there and leave it on there for years, it can actually start to cause problems and get up under your frets and either soften, kind of rot the wood, or basically ultimately cause some loose frets and loose fret ends. So once I explain that to the customer, then they jump on board and they understand and they're fine with me cleaning it the vast majority of the time. All right, so I do want to demonstrate some of that, but let's get through the crowning step. I'm going to blue the frets again. Do you think it would be useful to do the little drawing and kind of talk about that on the whiteboard?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. All right, let's blue these, and then we're going to step into the lecture room for just a second. And I just want to help you visualize the concept here and the goal with crowning the frets. There are a lot of tools that you can use to achieve this. Lots of people are, you know, pretty set with their tool of choice. There are a lot of ways to get to the end result that you need. And so I can show you my favorite one. I can talk about some other ones that are out there, but let's jump over here for just a second. So at this point, we have created a level plane with these fret tops, okay? So I'm going to draw a line, and this is just an imaginary line, right, that the frets are sitting at. In just a second. So this is not a string. This is just to show you that all these frets are level. I'm going to draw some level frets here. I'm going to make them large and closer together than they would be, just so I can fit them all into this. Get the point across, okay? All right, so let's say we've got some frets here, and right now we've gone through with that leveling bar, and they do have a nice level plane that they're on, but they're flat. And like I said earlier, if the bridge is down here, for instance, the flatter the fret is, the further the string comes off this way, right? This is the last point of contact on that fret. For the string as well, if we push it down, right? So now, instead of the string coming off the dead center of the fret wire like we want it to, it's actually shortened the string slightly, which will sharpen the note and cause tuning, ultimately intonation problems, right? So we need to ensure that the string, I'm going to try to draw this down the middle as well as I can, an imaginary line, but that's the point that we want to be the highest point of the fret. So that when we push a string down, this is the part that the string touches, and it does not touch the surrounding metal, right? We want it to come right off the center of the fret. That's the high point, contact point, and our note will be more in tune. All right, so how do we do that? Now that we have this plane, we need to not compromise that high point, but we need to get all this other stuff out of the way. And I'm going to reshape the fret to be like a half dowel, a nice rounded shape. Can you see that okay? Create an imaginary shape that we're trying to achieve here, right? So we're going to get rid of this material out here. We no longer need, I mean, the base of the fret wire is still going to be the same width. It's going to come out here, but it's mostly, all the stuff up here that we're going to be removing. It's really not even that much off the sides. More like this, probably. Yeah, something more like that, okay? So that's what we're going to do with our crowning file. And so, one, our note will play more in tune, but also, when combined with a really nice polish in the next step, it will make for this awesome buttery feel because there's a minimal resistance that the string, is touching a minimal amount of metal. And so when you're bending notes and stuff like that, it's just buttery and awesome. All right, so let's go look at that. Like I said, there have been, many iterations of different types of crowning tools through the years. Sure, they can all work, and a lot of people like different ones, but this has kind of been the tried and true standard for some time now. Music Nomad has come out with a version of this that also works really nicely. There's got a lot of cool features that they've taken, this idea and kind of expanded or refined it. Expanded upon it, and I think a lot of people think they've improved it a little bit. But the older versions of these StewMac diamond offset crowning files is what this is called. The older versions are a little different than the newer versions. So if I had to buy one today, I may consider that Music Nomad one instead of this, or even the StewMac Z file. The original Z file is my favorite of the three. I've seen people that have no idea what they're doing get really great results with that file, but they all have their quirks. They all have little downsides and things that you need to do to learn how to use them correctly. All right, so I'm going to come in here, and let's just take a swipe or two now. We're going to find that I had a lot of leveling to do on these frets. And so, right, in step one, what we were trying to do is just make the blue go away from the very top of the fret. Step two, in crowning, it's kind of the opposite. We want to just now leave the blue in the top center of the fret. And I want to make this line as small and narrow as I possibly can without going through it. Okay, if this line disappears and I continue to file, now that's lower than here. And in theory, we need to go back and do step one over again because it's no longer level. Okay, so we're going to go through. I'm going to keep this off for just a second because honestly, a lot of times you'll find a little less light can help you see this stuff a little bit better in some of these steps. I mean, we always like a lot of light for most steps, but this is one that sometimes it can help. So, especially for the camera. All right, so some of these files you may be able to get right on top and you just file until the line's really small. Sometimes it's going to blast right through the top, and so we might have to work it from the side a little bit and then slowly stand it up and then work it over from this side and slowly stand it up, and you're going to still see that line get more and more narrow. I'm going to keep checking and making sure that I didn't go through. Okay, so I'm getting close. I'm going to see if we can still see it with the light on. Yeah, it's still there, so I'm just going to take this back off. Okay, so you can see the blue. Okay, so like this through here, just about done. That's great. I can't really conceivably get it much narrower than it is like right there. There you can see it. There's a couple shots that were great. For the most part, I want to lay off of this now. Pardon my gluey and stain-ridden fingers from some heavy days in the spray booth the last couple of days. This is a little wider back here and a little bit wider back here. All right, so now I need to maybe consider pinpointing some areas, and that's really where this rounded part shines, and that's really what that's for, is to help me just kind of pinpoint a spot. And I don't want to risk coming off of the guitar and stabbing it and messing up the finish. And so when I'm really on these edges, I like, it's more of an up and down, kind of a bobbing motion, I suppose. More of a kind of a fulcrum that happens that I'm kind of rotating on. I'm going to come up here to this fret end and do the same. Okay, that's looking pretty good. See if we can, there we go. Hooray. All right, so a nice thin blue line. Like I said, I want to get that as small as I can without making it disappear at any spot. And I think I can go a little more. I'm going to turn the light on for a second here, and then we'll turn it off so that we can get good camera shots. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, boom. That's great. That's as small as I can get that thing. If you can achieve that, you're in great shape, and I'm very happy if I can do that across every fret. All right. So the thing we got to watch out for now, this in a repair setting, when I had to take off as much material as I did, I can kind of I can go at it a little more vigorously or liberally, so to speak, I suppose, and not have to worry so much about blasting through the line, at least at first. But on a refret, these are brand new frets, or if your if your level went really fast, there's going to be some spots that are mostly still crowned. It's still pretty round. You didn't flatten the top very much. In that instance, you have to be very careful. And I'll tell people to just come in and take a couple swipes and check. If you go over it lightly, right on the top, and look at it, and you see that the blue is gone, do not hit that anymore. If you kind of take one light swipe and it goes away, it's not the end of the world. You can probably just continue on and avoid that spot. But if you take more swipes there, you're done. I mean, you got to back up and re-level, right? You just compromise the level that you did in step one. So that's what we got to watch out for. And you can actually see, I'm going to do this one more time for a second, and then I'm just going to blast through a few of them. But I just took 2 or 3 swipes on this one, and it's almost like really thin there. I'm almost done in the center. I don't know if you can really get the idea. Yeah, there's a pretty good idea. So we're almost done in the middle there. So I have to be careful. This is kind of full speed. You just kind of get into the groove, and you go at it, pinpoint a few spots. Boom, that one looks great. Let's do a few, and then we can just get a look at them. And you'll also notice that these pits are almost gone now, because I've taken the sides off of the pits, and now it's just a little speck in the very center at the top. You'll see after the next step when I polish, they'll be smaller yet. It wouldn't be worth it for me to have leveled, to continue leveling to make those smaller and go potentially below the point of 30 thousandths of fret wire, right, in my height. You'll find that below 30, part of the reason too is that you can't crown it. This file just won't be able to give it the dome that you need. You could try some of the files that people use, triangle files and things. It's still going to be a lot harder when that fret's really short. That looks great. I'm using the 300 grit, by the way, 300 grit version. This one's old enough that I believe they're the same thickness on each side. There might be medium and narrow. That's what they are now. They've got a medium and a narrow side. And they do have a more coarse version that I almost never use, the 150 grit. And that's really, if you have stainless steel wire or maybe some giant wire and you did have to do a bunch of leveling and you just want to kind of get it close with the 150 first so you don't have to file for, ever. The ends are usually where you're going to need to spend the most time. Most of the pinpointing will need to be done on the ends. Those are the areas that typically need more leveling, or certain ones will be leveled more. They'll be flatter. All right, good. Okay, looking good. All right, thanks. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.